Jerry was born prematurely while his mother was a patient in the TB hospital. As she was not able to care for him while she was a patient, her grandmother, Lena Tuha, took care of him for the first 3 years of his life. And he learned the Apache ways and listening to her stories. When he was 3, Don Martin married his mother and adopted him. Lena Tuha lived until he was 13. She instilled in him to be proud of his heritage and reminded him that his roots were in Arizona. Jerry served 4 years in Vietnam as a Marine Corps medic and received a Bronze Star. He's also been a medic, an over-the-road truck driver, a fiber optic engineer. He's also owned a telecom company and a government contractor for the government, has a top secret clearance. He's been married 25 years and has 4 children and 12 grandchildren. As a retiree, he's been volunteering at Fort Vernon, giving talks about Geronimo and the Scouts to school children for 4 years.
Thank you, Fran, for that wonderful introduction. And again, thank you for having me here, like you did before. This is becoming my old stomping grounds now. I was just here November 11th, which was Veterans Day. And during that time, I was able to go ahead and coordinate with Washington, D.C., the unveiling and the dedication of the National Native American not museum, memorial. There, that's the word I was looking for. And I was here doing that, and if I get my pal there to, can I see the screen here? I'm going to have you click on something, which was as a result of my being here. This is me, my song, and oh no, okay. Well, my animal is the eagle. There should be sound with that. Here we go. Incidentally, I do have a CD from that period of time. That was my first solo album. I used to be the lead singer for Heart Song and some other various groups, which were small time. So was I. So this is why I got to push it now, 30-some years later, you know. It's not, for me, it's not dead, okay? Nor is my patriotism for America. Here we go, folks. First of all, I want to see if I can get a show of hands of how many people have already seen or been at one of my presentations. I got 2. Well, that's not bad. So I can use my old material then, can't I? Okay. Here's another question I got. I'm sorry to see that we don't have young people. Not that I have anything against the seniors, okay? Don't get me wrong. Talking to you guys, especially the senior guys, I mean, you are here because you're part of that past living history. And, you know, we have so much knowledge that we just got to share and get out there, okay? And especially when it comes to the truth. One of the things that I did learn, and I learned it from Sheila over at Camp Verde at Fort Verde, was that having 2 sides of the story. Now I can tell you that at the young age of 12, I started really doing some real heavy research to see about my great-great-grandfather. Not just being a namesake, but I wanted to be sure that I got it right. And I'm one of those individuals that was lucky enough to be raised by my great-grandmother, who was fresh off the reservation, who took me on and said, I'm not going back. And she would protect me. Now, protect me? There's a difference between protecting and spoiling. She had a nice way of lots of money, which I finally found out how that came into being. We're talking about a Native American living off a reservation, and yet when she was off of the reservation, she had lots of silver dollars, lots of $20 gold pieces. And you know what, you'll learn more about that, because there is a book that is in the process of being, what do you call it, proofread and stuff. So, and it's called Lina Tuha, which is my little grandma's name. And then in parentheses is an Apache maiden, and the author is Isherbaum, and she's the one there, a nice, pretty little blonde. So hopefully, we were hoping that we would have it out before my next speech or presentation, but it's coming. Okay, and so look for it when you can on Amazon. And I got a couple of announcements myself. Okay, here's some of the announcements that I got to give. Cell phones off or silent. The restrooms are in the back here. You need to sign up for the museum roundup. And if you're not a member, you need to join. And we always need volunteers. And the latest in what news is needed. Okay, oh yeah. Now, believe it or not, this is going to look ugly because I normally don't wear glasses, but I gotta read because this is concerning our weather. It says, it was autumn and the Indians on the remote reservation asked their chief if the winter was going to be cold or mild. Since he was an Indian chief in a modern society, he had never was taught the old ways. When he looked at the sky, he couldn't tell what the weather was going to be. Nevertheless, on what side, let me read that part again. Nevertheless, to be on the safe side, he replied to his tribe that the winter was indeed going to be cold, and that the members of the village should collect firewood to be prepared. Also, being practical leader, as he was, after several days he got an idea. He went to the telephone booth back in the day, called the National Weather Service and asked, is this winter going to be cold? The answer was, it looks like the winter is going to be cold, and quite cold indeed. The meteorologist said from the weather station. So the chief went back to his people and told them, collect even more wood in order to be more prepared. A week later, he called the National Service again, Weather Service again. It was going to be very, very cold. Yes, the man at the weather station said again, replying, it's definitely going to be very, very cold. The chief again went back to his people and ordered them to collect even scraps of wood and find anything burnable that they could have for this coming winter. 2 weeks into this, he got a call again to the weather station. Are you absolutely sure that this winter is going to be very, very, very cold? Absolutely, the man replied. It's going to be one of the coldest winters ever. How can you be so sure? The chief asked. The weatherman replied, the Indians are collecting wood like crazy. You bet. All right. You got to have some Indian humor somewhere. The kind of jokes I used to hear, because I was not on the reservation, I was out in the freelance world of freedom. I used to get from my kids my age about, I belonged on a reservation. I had no idea what a reservation was. But I did not try to hide the fact of my lineage, that I was a Native American. And that was because my grandmother insisted on it, my mother insisted on it, and then when she married the man she married, he insisted on one important thing. It's not important what you are. You need to become who you are. So that's why I'm here today. I'm here today because of a promise. My grandmother said, return to the people. Find a way, find a means of doing whatever it takes to help the people. They are your people. So that's why I do what I do today. And of course, the topic is going to have to be my great-great-grandfather. He had several things not going well for him. For him it was liberty or death, or that was the question. Sometimes it was either, do I have freedom or do I have to die in order to have my freedom? This right here is this area. This area, I hope we have a lot of Christians here, because I too am a Christian. But what a lot of people don't know, only a few, and some of my relatives here, I got some. They know that this area, which is always famous for vortexes, is more than just vortexes. As you guys have the Bible, you know about Mount Sinai. This area here is our St. Sinai. This area here is where our ancestral ancestors that have passed still roam. And I just want you to know that it's sacred ground, and I just simply want you to appreciate and give it honor to this hallowed ground that we have in this area. It's more than just beautiful to the eyes. It should be beautiful to your heart, and it should bring everyone that is here peace, peace of mind, peace of soul. And with that, I want to say welcome. Welcome to our domain and reverence. Who are the Apaches? Real simple. They were hard-nosed. They came from the north all the way down, settled in the southwestern area here, and they were innovators. Whatever you threw at them, they threw back. And how did they do it? They scattered. And what I mean by scattered, I'm telling you, when their camp was hit, they scattered. They had 2 rendezvous points that they could always meet at. They could pick up what they could get in their hands and then gather later and see what they could have for resources. And then it was revenge time. They took the battle back. So we had a lot of that. A lot of people don't understand the raids. I even was approached once and said, you know, if we let the Indians alone, you would have killed yourselves off. Because all you could do was raid one another. I had to explain to this person that those raids, and we're talking about early raids, where it was from tribal to tribes. Understand that you guys enjoy NFL football. In fact, you got the Super Bowl coming. We have offense and defense too. What they didn't understand is when you had an attacking tribe going into the other tribe, they had rules and regulations. That's right. What was going on was no children, no elderly, only warrior against warrior. And sometimes it got real brutal. We didn't go in there to kill, but we did go in there to maim, and we did go in there to knock them out if we could, and then take what they had. And at that time, the most prized possession used to be the horse. Of course, that was during their peacetime. Later, after the wars, the most possession or prized possession had to be guns or ammunition. Because as far as horses, the Indian himself could cover 20 miles in 18 hours. Yeah, think about that. They didn't walk, they trotted in all the time. In fact, it's one of the things that General Crook found about dealing with the Apaches. He did all kinds of other things elsewhere, but when it came to dealing with the Apaches, he found a couple of things. One, you can't corner them. They won't stand their ground. Their tactics are far different than any of the other native tribes that they had fought. And then finally, in the end, guess what? He realized the most important lesson. In order to find an Apache, took another Apache to do it. That is a fact. That's what happened with Sheila here with the state park. She'll tell you. The White Mountain Apaches were commissioned to be scouts. They had to communicate going back and forth with the hostiles. And it was then that they could communicate, and that's where Mr. Lupin, which is a lone wolf, that was the name that he was given for Crook, he tried to talk Geronimo into a peace treaty. Geronimo almost conceded with that first peace treaty down in Mexico. The only problem was there was a bootlegger that was there amongst them who got a moment to come up to Geronimo and tell him the facts. Here's the facts, Geronimo. As soon as they get you, and especially you, and these other people that are following you, over the Rio Grande on the U.S. side, they plan on hanging you. So his response to that was, they're going to have me to do that. So the smart man says to Crook, I agree, I will take into consideration, and I will even agree to the terms being, I will be arrested, be a prisoner of war, I will be out of this state, and then in 2 years' time, I will return. And those that follow me, that will be the same condition. He agreed, but he says, you know what I got to do? He says, I got to go get the rest of my people, bring them back. He said, give him 24 hours, and I'll meet you back. Crook said, okay. And on that meeting, the photographer his name was Fly, like McFly, Back in the Future. Be nice if you could add that. But anyway, he could have got more pictures than he got. I definitely would have loved more pictures. But, okay, there is that picture of that meeting. And after 24 hours passed, guess what? No Geronimo. Another 12 hours after that, he came back. And let me tell you where he came back to. He came back to Fort Rudy. And he telegraphed Washington to a general that we all know from the Civil War. His name is Sherman. And he said, I had Geronimo in my grasp. We talked, we negotiated, but for whatever reason, he refused to be escorted back across the border to the United States. In essence, Sherman said, you idiot. He said, sir, you don't realize what I was up against. I had a small party. We were there to negotiate. We were on a peace mission. I only had a handful of people there. You didn't see what he had or how heavily they were armed. And he says, and another fact that I need to stress with you, Mr. Sherman, is we were not on U.S. soil, we were on Mexican soil. So that's kind of where we had to parlay, and everything falls into his realm on what he does or doesn't do. Now we got to stop, go back on a little bit of history. History of the fact that Geronimo was on a reservation 3 times. Each time there was an incident that caused him to say, reservation life is not for me. The last time that he left and came back, he did something that was kind of unscrupulous. He called it recruiting. He gathered all of the young men, told them that they could gather their wives and their children and their parents, and they needed to ride with him, that they were going to leave, and he needed numbers because he was going to retaliate in a big way. Those that refused, he simply reached for his gun, pulled it out, and says, you either ride with me or you can die right here. He had lots of volunteers after that. In fact, they left with more than 600. And that was counting the warriors, children, parents, etc. Now, he caused havoc both in the United States and in Mexico. But why? What started all of this, where he used to always fight the Mexicans, but why is he fighting the U.S. now? Because they were invading his territory. They were accusing him of things that he was not even a part of. While he was being on the reservation, the newspapers got a tombstone in various areas, had the mitigated gold to say that he was out on the loose, causing death and destruction. I mean, when he gets the news, he says, I never left a reservation, why am I being falsely accused? So guess what? I don't know about you, maybe he's an adolescent, or at least had a mentality of an adolescent, because he said, you're going to accuse me of it? Then I'll do it. Is that what you want from me? Do you want to give me all this credit? Then I can do it. And guess what he had? He had followers that didn't need leading or to be led or have their own leadership. They acted and did what they did to get provisions back to the main stronghold. And this really caused a lot of havoc, a lot. But I'm going to go through this real quick. I'm going to show you some things about Arizona. This here talks about Arizona homelands, and they were in the mountains, shelters, water, valleys, deep canyons, deserts, and the southern Great Plains, including the now eastern Arizona, northern Mexico, from Sonora to Chihuahua. Now, when you stop and think about all that, that is a big area, huge. And of course, that encompassed New Mexico, West Texas, southern Colorado. This is known collectively, if you hear the term, Apacheria. Here in Arizona, federally recognized, these are the tribes: Apaches of Oklahoma, Fort Sill Apaches, Dural Apache, Mescalero, San Carlos, Tonto Apaches. The White Mountain Apaches are Fort Apache Reservation. And then, of course, the Yavapai Apaches. The Yavapai Apaches used to hold this area, like the Levites used to take care of the Ark, covenant of the Ark. Well, this particular tribe, the Yavapai Apaches, were in charge of protecting this environment here in Sedona. They have their own seals or logos, and you can see what they look like. Some of them are really nice. I like the one that's on Fort Sill. I definitely like the seal of the Yavapai. Anyway, those seem to, or even the bottom one there, Mescalero, was pretty good. They're colorful, if nothing else. Compensators of war. The Apache tribes fought the invading Spanish, Mexicans, people of the century. First Apache raids on Sonora appeared to take place during the late 17th and 19th century. Confrontations during the American Indian Wars, and the U.S. Army found Apaches to be fierce warriors and skillful strategists. Here's what's interesting about the skillful strategists. How many of us, by show of hand, have heard of guerrilla warfare? Okay. How many of us have heard of West Point? Yeah. That's not theirs, that's the Apaches. All of that. Camouflage, surprise attack, decoy. That's where they got it from. So, one day I'm going to go ahead and write to them and see what I can do about plagiarism. When the United States went to war against Mexico in 1846, many Apache bands promised U.S. soldiers safe passage to the land. When the U.S. claimed former territories of Mexico in 1846, Mangus Coloradus signed a peace treaty with the nation, respecting them as the conquerors of the Mexican lands. An uneased peace with the U.S. citizens held until 1850. An influx of gold miners into the Santa Rita Mountains led to conflict with the Apaches. This period is sometimes called the Apache Wars. Whew, the Apache Wars. You know what? The settlers out here, they would at least put their ranches within hearing distance of gunfire. The Apaches knew how to handle that. They'd hit one ranch, and this is how they would do it. They would sneak up just as close as they could get, and probably close enough that they could reach out and touch them. This meant every little member that was around. That meant the guy who came out of his cabin and went down to the corral and was doing his horses. He'd do that by habit. They knew where he would be all the way down. The only people that they were is how many people were inside that dwelling. But once close enough, they had the means of having a signal, a yell, gunfire would erupt, or a nice Bowie knife would come out, and a throat would be cut, and then the dead would be there. Then they would take those possessions. They would take meat out of them, their meat lockers, and bedding and clothing. You see, when it first started out, the Apaches used to always have buckskins. But you ever notice how the Apache dress is not that of buckskin totally? It's soldiers' vests. It's material that's made out of flour bags and other material that came off of wagon trains, stagecoaches, you know. They go, oh, this is nice. Let me see. Oh, yeah, that'll fit. That'll work. Yeah. So it changed their whole costume or their regalia. And as time progressed too, what else you'll find is we're not just using the bow and arrows anymore. But the bow and arrow was a good weapon. Let me tell you why it was a good weapon. Because if you had an individual that was suddenly hiding behind a rock, or suddenly put his horse down and he's hiding behind that horse, or he's behind a bush, he's pretty well covered because you can shoot, but your bullet goes pretty straight. But he could take his bow and arrow, and mind you, something that I bet you didn't know, poison-tipped arrows. Yeah, rattlesnakes, the Gila monster. You didn't know about that, did you? Take that, let Newton's law of gravity, shoot that bad boy up in the air, it comes down. It's almost like shooting around the corner. They could get their victim. Did they really have to wound him? That's all, just wound him. Because he's going to die. Yeah. So the bow and arrow was still masterful. The lance was kind of okay at the first when you were fighting the Spaniards, but the U.S. Army had sabers, and most of them had guns. And so one thing that my grandmother told me about acclimating, you have to acclimate quick. And to make that point to me, they put it in my head so I'd never forget it. She said, if you have an enemy, whatever weapon he's using on you, guess what? That weapon is a weapon to him as well. So me as a kid, I go, wow, so if we get invaded by aliens and they have a ray gun, I got to get a hold of that ray gun and use it on the alien, right? She says, that'll work. Sure it would. Yeah, think about that. How many weapons in fighting, if they're using it on you, just turn it around and use it on them. So now we got something that I would like to discuss. This is a war party. Remember I told you about General Crook? And he told Sherman, see there? Uh-oh. They talked, but they were armed. They were on Mexican land. They weren't about to give it up that easy. And when I say armed, you can see the rifles, right? Some of them were 50 caliber, because the 50 caliber, which I was supposed to have had one here, is really impressive. That was my great-grandfather's best and foremost weapon. He loved the 50 caliber. It was a single shot. But boy, he looked at it and thought about it as you would think about AT&T. Reach out there and touch them. Yeah. But we also had other weapons that were being used in early times, and that was the Winchester. What made the Winchester a weapon of destruction, at least, was because it would repeat. It was no longer a single shot. This particular weapon is an heirloom. Well, my grandmother left Francisco, a cousin of mine, said, I'm going to unbury a weapon and I'm going to have you take it with you, when he heard she was going to Colorado. Because if they find out I have this, I could be looking at jail time. And so she said, fine. She took it, and when she got it, she had it in Colorado. She bought a cover for it, and she kept it. And as you can see before, I passed away, or she passed away. I didn't pass away yet. But when she passed away, this is one of many artifacts that I received. And if you want to see more of them, talk to Sheila back there. She's got all kinds of things in the glass case that I've put on loan. It's only on loan. She says yes. Yeah, we agreed. It's only on loan. So you can see some of those things there. I want to talk more about why General Crook says, you're calling the shots, not me, okay? My great-great-grandfather finally possessed what is known as a Bowie knife. Has anybody seen a Bowie knife? Sure. Does anybody know about the Bowie knife? Jim Bowie was a Louisiana statesman. He actually started out with a sword, and from the sword, he created a knife that he could throw. This is a throwing knife, if you can believe it or not. And as you can see, it is very large. It has the blades all the way down on this side, and something that was really different. It also has the sharp cutting blade in this portion here. It cuts through things like a hot knife through butter. Very deadly. And you don't have to get up close to do something. Jim Bowie made it so that the technique was by holding it by the handle and throwing it, it would stick to where it was going. So that puts the hearse on somebody. Yeah. Now, what I got here, what happened to my mic here? Hello, hello? Hello? Did I do something when I pulled the knife out? I might have. Hello? Hello? Testing, testing. Testing. Oh, there we go. Okay, here. A little too loud. Okay. So, what I have on the gun belt here is for the rifle. For this. That's the ammunition for that. My grandmother said, I don't know where he got it, how he got it, but what was really neat was that he had 2 Colt 45s with pearl handles. I said, what are pearl handles? She says they're white and they're really shiny, they change colors depending on if the sun would hit it. And she says, he had 2 of them. He had one just like this in the front holster. He kept the other in his back of his belt. And then this little jewel here was what held the ammunition for the peacemakers. One here, one in the back. So this will give you an idea of what you're looking at up there. You can't always see what they had, but they had the belts, ammunition, knives, and they knew how to use them. They were deadly accurate. They were deadly silent. A little more about, in the center there, the tall guy. That's Nache. He's the chief. Geronimo was never a chief. He was a medicine man. He was a warrior. He was on the war council, but he was not a chief. Right next to him, on his left, see those 2 white markings? On the vest there, that was his ID. You'd always find Geronimo, because he'd always marked with his 2 leather patches on each side. That was always part of his dress. And then the rest you'll see way on the end here, you'll see 1, 2, 3 women, and then at the far other portion of it, you see 2 women as well. But the rest of those are men well armed. And you'll notice one little youngster right here. Right there. And what has he got? He's got quivers of the bow and arrow. Okay? He was nobody to mess with either. But what is important is, here's what we had. We had the chaos, we had the fight. And as you notice there, this guy here with the ceremonial, you see a couple of them there, the ceremonial white. I used to do that. In fact, I thought about doing it, but then I thought, you know what, I do that, it will not ever fail. You know what happens when you got little kids? They shrink. And they get upset. And all it is my stripe. I don't know why, but this really upsets little children. They don't like it, you know. There's that clown syndrome, I don't know. Yeah. This guy here is funny. The first time Geronimo wound up on the reservation, he met with Gatewood. Gatewood escorted him to the reservation, and there were men from Texas that were trying to recognize Geronimo and wanted to take possession of him to take him back to Texas. And Gatewood was in civilian clothes, and he said no, he was a prisoner, that he was a soldier, and that he was government property, and he was going back. In fact, he was going on the reservation. But what happened was they were at a depot, and these guys parked out front, and they said, you know what, we're going to take him as soon as he comes out of that building. Gatewood, looking through the windows and stuff, said, okay, I know what they're up to. So he had the master of the building bring some horses to the back. Went out to the corral and went the long way around and had horses in the back. They snuck through a window in the back, and then they rode straight away, leaving those Texans waiting for somebody to come out so they could capture Geronimo. Geronimo used to have different times that he wasn't captive, like in Farmersville, Texas. They recognized him. They arrested him. They put him in the jail. They went and they found it that they have the Geronimo, the legendary, in their prison. They went to sleep and then came back in the morning, and for whatever reason, he was gone. They forgot to put a guard on the jailhouse. Yeah. And so it's like the big fish that got away, you know. What proof do you have, you know? And that happened in Farmersville, Texas. But he put Geronimo on the reservation. Then he got away. And like I said, 3 different times. Mr. Gatewood here is very, very interesting here because, like I said, he first escorted Geronimo, and then Crook was the general doing the stuff, and then, like I said, remember that mistake of letting him go? Well, Sherman fired him and replaced him with General Miles. This is a funny story on General Miles. General Miles said in 6 months I will have Geronimo in my custody. It didn't happen. Finally, after the 2nd year, he wrote to Washington and said, Geronimo's like the wind. He's been there, but he's gone as soon as you get your troops there. Just disappears. And then, before we get to that last part, I've got to tell you one of my favorite stories. Grandma used to say, was Geronimo a magician, or does he know how to make his escape? He was an escape artist. She said, I'll give you an example. I'm going to tell you the story that was told to me. Geronimo, out riding on the flat plains, knew where his destination was to be. But casually, at a trot, until something caught his eye on the left. He looked over, it was a flash. He then looked to the right deliberately and waited, and sure enough, there was a flash. You see, the Army uses mirrors. They would communicate with each other. And unfortunately, he knew they were on his left. They knew he was on his right. And this is one of those moments that he was by himself. So now what is he going to do? Right in front of him, he has his plateau. He starts out at a canter. Now he's going at a gallop. And now you can see on both sides the dust. And you can almost smell the sweat off of the horses of the cavalry coming on him at both sides. And now the race is on. He's riding, getting to that plateau. He reaches a plateau just ahead of them. He starts up the plateau side as far as his horse can go, and then he dismounts and he zigzags up the rest because now they're shooting at him. Now they say, you go that side and come around. You guys go around that side. The rest of us here are going to go up the hill behind him so that he doesn't double back. Geronimo makes it to the top, got the two sides going on both sides, meet him on the other side, and then you got the backup, the pressure. You got these guys coming up behind him. On the other side, Geronimo reaches the other side and goes down the hill, and guess what is right there? A little horse ranch. A corral that's right up against, butted up against the hill. He jumps on a horse, he runs over, knocks the poles down, gets the horses out. Now he starts a stampede. He's part of the stampede. And then he hits a ravine, goes down in the ravine, lays his horse down. And now he's laying on his horse in this ravine, and he has his gun, and everything is just above his ground level that he can see. But where he parked in the most strategic place. Where? As the sun was coming down. So now what you have is you have the soldiers coming up, and they see all this dust, and they see that there was a stampede. They're looking out, and they can see all of these horses going different directions, and the dust that they're creating, and they're looking into the sun on the ground, and it's too blurry to see, but they're going to make a run for it anyway. They're going to chase him. They start out to chase him. And what does he do? He lays quietly as they go by. And then once they rode off far enough, he got his horse up out of the ravine, and he proceeded in the direction that he was going to start with. That was one of those close calls. Grandma had lots of them, close calls. But the one that was the saddest that you never hear about, as you can see, Gatewood started at the beginning. Gatewood, Crook, and General Nelson are in the middle. General Nelson finds out about Gatewood, says, you really know Geronimo? He says, yes. Does Geronimo know you by sight? He says, yes, he does. He says, I'm going to offer you any one of my 5,000 men, which Crook didn't have that. But how did he get 5,000 men? The Civil War is over. Now we have a surplus of soldiers who can fight the Indians, which Crook didn't have, but he has. He refused. And with a small detachment of food and ammunition, he only required 2 Chiricahua scouts. General Miles is on the right, General Crook is on the left. But here's what brought something that nobody talks about. They say, okay, Geronimo surrendered. Well, what most people won't discuss is why. What caused him to suddenly give up? What caused him to say, I've had enough? That wasn't like Geronimo, was it? Okay. Sad, but true. My grandma says, you need to understand why we try to protect you, your mom and I. Because of what the real world has done. They've not only done it in Canada, they're doing it here in the United States. We've had our children stripped from our arms to never come back. To be told they ran away. And when we go and investigate, they have no proof one way or the other of what has gone on these schools. Not all. Some have made it. There is a book that those of you historians should get. It's I Rode with Geronimo Benitez. It's a good book. He is one of those that saw a glass not half empty, but half full. When he went to the school, he said, I don't have to hunt anymore for my food. What? These shoes instead of moccasins? These fit a whole lot better. I like them. He fit in. But those that didn't, you can see what happened to them. And this is how it went on the trip for Gatewood. Gatewood on the morning left. He sent the supply van ahead of him. He and his 2 scouts rode down into Mexico in the portion that they knew Geronimo should be in about, with a white flag. Finally, they were interrupted by an Indian that showed up and says, change direction, go that way. Geronimo's ready to meet with you. You know, that's what you're here to do, is you, under the white flag, that means you want to discuss things, you want to talk. No gunfire, nothing. He said, right. So the Indian said, only you, not your scouts, only you. And he escorted him through canyons and finally met up with Geronimo. Now let me explain something about monarchy. Monarchy is the women call the shots. They don't only have the babies. The last decision on anything comes from the woman. If you're born and your daddy is somebody, it doesn't make a difference. But if your mother or grandmother is of the right lineage, then you are somebody. The elderly women were there, and Gatewood came up and said, Geronimo, as you know, since you've left the reservation, you're not viewed as a good person, and you're stealing the children. And Geronimo said, I know nothing of this. He said, what are you talking about? He says, they're going to schools, and they're not coming back. The women said, we're tired, we're hungry, we're spent, we can't go no more. But if our children are massacred, then who's even going to know of our existence? They said, Geronimo, surrender. And surrender he did. This is the reason he surrendered. The motto of the school was, kill the Indian, save the man. This was done, the biggest one and the most prevalent one was Carlisle, Pennsylvania. These are some of the Indians that were dealt with. They were stripped of their language, stripped of their culture. This here, Phoenix, Arizona, Indian School Road. That's here too. Finally, you'll find that when Geronimo surrendered, he was supposed to have 2 years, and instead he was a prisoner of war for 27. When they first gave up, this is all that there was. That they had taken all of the rest of the, what they call hostiles or renegades, and they had sent them ahead. But this was the last holdout here that they sent to Fort Bowie, and then from Fort Bowie they were sent on the railroad out. This is Geronimo. And as you can see, this is Geronimo. This is Nache. And what's interesting, they're not wearing moccasins, they're wearing Western boots. They had an individual that wanted to fit them up. And here it talks about the most important thing was that when he did give up, he gave up on September 4th, 1886. Once I moved like the wind, now I surrender to you, and that is all. That's what he had said. Down below, his deathbed. I should never have surrendered. I should have fought until I was the last man alive. That was his sentiment. Who is Geronimo? Luck is one who yawns and he who yawns. Goyathle, the wise one, or the one who is wise. And then Geronimo this is important. It's a Spaniard name. It's not an Indian name. With the outcry of the soldiers cried out to their patron Saint Gerald, while the massacre was going on in Mexico, revenge battle led by Goyatle for the deadly attack of his family outside Janos. He lost his mother, he lost his wife, he lost 3 children. They mimicked the outcry, which became the victory chant of the battle. Goyatle then decided that he would take his new name. You say, we say, Geronimo. The Spaniard enunciation of Geronimo is Geronimo. That's the name he took. Geronimo. And as you can see, Geronimo is a Benaki leader, Chiricahua leader, and the leader of the people in defense of his homeland against the Mexicans' mighty, or the military might of the United States government. That was his default, not the Mexicans. And with that, I'll just let you know, it has been a real pleasure being here, and I'm sure that we should have a session of maybe some questions. See, you can test me for the next 5 minutes is all. On what you know, or what you think, or what you might have an answer to, because I found an answer both good and bad. I found variations and deviations of different aspects on different books. I would say that Eva Ball was probably the best narrator of the Apaches. I found her to be very, very accurate. And one of those things that she points out several times is that the women are in charge. Don't forget that, the women are in charge. You know? They make the last decision. So with that, we got any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Do you have any family stories on Geronimo's work as a medicine man?
Yes, I do. As a medicine man, he was one of the highest, the best. In fact, what was noted was that he could, at times, with his ability, cause a lightning storm as a diversion. He was also known to be able to walk on wet sand and never leave a trail, leave a footprint. He was also accused of being a shapeshifter. So, yes, his abilities was phenomenal. Maybe one more question out there? Right here.
Where is he buried?
He is buried at Fort Sill. I forget the name of the actual cemetery. There is a cemetery there. It's a pyramid of rocks, and on top of it, our symbol of the eagle is on top of it, and it is still guarded. They have an Indian guard that guards that 24/7. They have different shifts.
His remains haven't been stolen. I remember reading
On the bushes, we don't know whether the Skull Society has done that or not. But like my one cousin, Harold, Harvey? Anyway, Harlan, that's the name, okay. Harlan has been to Washington several times in order to have his remains moved back here to Arizona. At one time he went to Roosevelt as president and he says, please release my people. If you don't want to take your retaliation out, just take it out on me, let them go. And that didn't happen.
Have you ever consulted to the movies?
What's funny right now is my wife will tell you that I just got a call just the other day, and thank Sheila on this, that there's a movie maker that wants me to be cast in a motion picture. So we'll see what happens. Yes, sir.
How was your grandmother related to Geronimo, or was she?
She was related to Geronimo. Her name is Lena Tuha, and if you go back, you will read her. Tell me what her name is, the one wife, or you don't remember? Chiha. Okay, Chiha They wound up losing contact with Chiha. She got arrested and captured by the Mexicans, and then she kind of disappeared from everything. But the fact was she was pregnant. And when she was pregnant, she was a captive down in Mexico, and she gave birth. Later she escaped from there and then came up, and that's where she got recaptured and was put on the reservation. And that's where you have Lina Tuha. So that's how I come into play. So it's you. Yes, yes, you.
You started to tell us how your grandmother got her money.
Oh yeah, that's right. You know what? The best way to tell you that is that's a good sale on the book.